Hailed as one of global motorsport's most legendary venues, MotoGP has landed in Le Mans for round 6 in 2025. The Michelin Grand Prix is the biggest sporting spectacle in the world this weekend, with a capacity crowd crammed into the Bugatti circuit to see if Fabio Quartararo can become France's first MotoGP win on home ground in over 70 years. It's time to race in MotoGP. So we first raced here all the way back in 1969. What a classic Grand Prix venue it is. The Bugatti circuit in Le Mans, 5 kilometres south of the historic centre of nearby Le Mans, 200 kilometres southwest of Paris, 14 turns, just under 4.2 kilometres in length. Plenty of challenges in what's a compact layout, particularly hard braking into turn 3, into turn 8 in particular. Good overtaking opportunity as well, though, into that garage fair section. Sector 4 includes the Recordemont, the last 2 corners where there's always drama there down the years. Turn 1 gives the Michelin rubber a pretty strong workout, but are we going to be using slicks or rain tyres? That's the big question as we continue our countdown. This was 12 months ago. Jorge Martin into turn 3 on his way to the Le Mans treble. So under glorious clear blue skies here in Le Mans yesterday, and roared on by nearly 100,000 fans from a sensational pole position, was home crowd hero Fabio Quartararo. He made the early running in that 13-lap sprint as early disaster came the way of Pecco Bagnaia, the factory Ducati rider, crashing out of podium contention on the second lap. Quartararo fought so hard against firstly Marc Marquez and then Alex Marquez, and eventually another Ducati star in Fermin Aldeguer, as Quartararo thrilled a home crowd to just miss out on the podium. This was a pretty heated exchange he had late on with Aldeguer, and the rookie powering his Gresini Ducati to his first podium in the Premier class. But Marc Marquez crossed the line first. It is 6 sprints out of 6 so far for the number 93. And with Alex Marquez second once again in the Tissot sprint, it means that Marc Marquez is back in control of the MotoGP World Championship. Just 2 points separate the brothers going into this Michelin Grand Prix of France. At the moment, as you can see, after a damp start to proceedings this morning, where the MotoGP 10-minute warm-up session took place on a wet surface, Moto 3 and Moto 2 have taken place in dry conditions on full dry tracks on slick tyres. The big question, though, and it's a huge question, what will be the weather? What will be the conditions for our upcoming 27-lap MotoGP battle here in front of packed grandstands, as always, in Le Mans? It feels like we certainly have got a record crowd on our hands this weekend. But as we said, quite appropriate that we're in the skies, because it's all eyes on the skies right now, as there is rain forecast to hit this part of northwestern France at around lights out time 2 p.m. We did have rain spots falling right at the tail end of the Moto 2 race. In fact, it was so late in Moto 2, it was when the lead pack were taking the checkered flag. Have to say, though, it has abated over the last few minutes or so. So as it stands right now, we would be having a full dry Michelin Grand Prix of France. But this, of course, is Le Mans, which means, as far as the elements are concerned, anything can happen. Matt Burt and Lewis Sotheby joining you in the commentary box, with Jack Appleyard down in pit lane. And I guess, Lewis, we're all just looking skywards. Actually, we're just getting some breaking news here as we look at these amazing shots of the crowd here in Le Mans. Well, here in 2023, we had a crowd of 278,805. That was a record crowd, a weekend crowd for MotoGP. Last year, it was bettered. 297,471 fans joined us for the 2024 version of the French Grand Prix. We said all weekend, would we get our first ever weekend crowd of over 300,000 fans? Well, merci beaucoup, France, because you have done it. We have just had confirmation that our weekend crowd here in Le Mans has topped 300,000 and some. what a stat this is. We have had 311,797 fans. As we say, merci beaucoup, France. Always feels a pleasure and privilege, doesn't it, Lewis, to be part of this French Grand Prix. We said on Thursday the amount of people that were already here, it felt like we could get a record crowd. And once again, Le Mans has not let us down.
A sellout on this Sunday afternoon, and the biggest Grand Prix weekend attendance MotoGP has seen. The French Grand Prix, one of the destination events on the Grand Prix calendar for exactly that reason. We are 40 minutes away from the MotoGP race. We are around about half an hour away from the spine-tingling rendition of La Marseillaise, where there will be over 100,000 French fans singing along, with one of their own, Fabio Quartararo, sitting on pole position. Does it get any better than that if you're a French fan of MotoGP?
Yeah, what a place, steeped in history, of course, this Le Mans circuit. There's been racing, motorsport in this part of the world for well over 100 years. As we mentioned, it's a motorsport mad part of France, a motorsport mad part of the world. So thank you very much to all concerned, organisers, promoters, local authorities connected to this Le Mans Grand Prix, because once again, it has delivered something extra special. Let's hope we get something extra special over the course of 27 laps in, what, about 14 minutes time here, local time, in Le Mans. As you mentioned, it could be a wet start to this Grand Prix. It could be a flag-to-flag race, which sort of throws open the door potentially for a few dark horses. I was just thinking, actually, Johann Zarco is the perfect rider to follow into the back of the LCR Honda garage. He has humongous support here this weekend. There's been an army of number 5 flags, merchandise, filling the grandstands. Listen to the reception that Zarco's going to get as he comes out onto the main grandstand. He said yesterday, rain, no problem. Gives me probably my best chance of finishing on the podium here today. You think of Jack Miller, you think of Brad Binder. Joan Mir was quickest in the wet warm this morning for the factory Honda squad. The rain, though, without question, Lewis, does bring forward a few more contenders for glory here today.
Yeah, I guess you're quite conflicted if you're a French fan in the grandstands today, because Johann Zarco will surely see the weather as an opportunity. Fabio Quartararo, I'm quite sure, is of the opposite opinion. He spoke on the rider parade following the MotoGP warm this morning and said in the wet it was a disaster. So Quartararo very much hoping this one stays dry. We are less than 40 minutes away from lights out.
Maverick Vinales, 5th place he was at the checker flag in that sprint yesterday. Of course, he's got huge home support from the French fans here as well, riding for Hervé Poncheral's Red Bull KTM Tech 3 team. And while we're on the subject of Tech 3, I'm delighted to say we're joined by one of their ex-riders. Once again, a pleasure to welcome back into the commentary box Bradley Smith. Bradley, you've just walked to the commentary box, having enjoyed a bit of the pre-race atmosphere. I mean, this is a nightmare situation, isn't it? All the teams, all the riders are just looking skyward to see what the weather's going to do. I mean, you've been in this position before where it's, what, half an hour away before you're having to get right in the zone for the race. I mean, real testing, demanding scenario for riders and teams alike.
Yeah, it's certainly not fun. At the moment, it's kind of a little bit spit-spotting. It's just water in the air, so it's psychological rain, as they call it. You know, it's just enough to put you off. And then, you know, not be entirely sure what you want to do. It's stress for the mechanics. They need to have like the dry bike ready and the wet bike prepared, and then yeah, it's going to go either way. It's also part of the excitement, but also part of the headache of the flag to flag, because you know it's not going to be red flag, so you really have to make the right choice on tyres here. Which
I seem to recall you did once memorably back in Misano a few years ago. Yeah, you
exactly.
Don't bother yet.
When to change, just don't change. then you can't make a mistake, and it paid off well, so some good memories. And
we saw Marco Bezzecchi there have his off-track excursion early on in that sprint yesterday. That completely ended the factory Aprilia riders' hopes of scoring any points. And once again, he was back in the position of Mr. P2 yesterday for Alex Marquez. He was second behind Mark for the 6th successive sprint. He lost the World Championship lead in a pretty heavy old crash this morning as well, right at the back end of this morning's warm-up session, which did bring out the red flags. a fast get-off going through turn 2. What's that like, Bradley, when you have a crash right at the back end of a morning warm-up session, and the next time you've got to jump on the motorcycle is for the race itself? That can't be an easy scenario either.
Yeah, it doesn't help. Even when the mechanics do the absolute best job putting the bike back together, there's always something a little bit different. Maybe the handlebars in a slightly different position. We're talking 1 mil. Maybe the front brake doesn't feel quite the same, and yeah, it just takes a couple of laps in the race to get into it, and with such the level that everyone's attacking the out lap and the first flying lap here, it'll be tricky. But yeah, I think a lot of people as well maybe would have liked to have changed their bike after the sprint race. Normally you sit down with your team, you make a plan, you know, what you would like to change for the main race, but with those conditions this morning, they're not going to be like that. So I think most people will keep with what they ran in the sprint race yesterday, and just, you know, make some small tweaks maybe to traction control or power maps or something like that.
Well, he's back on top of the MotoGP World Championship, Marc Marquez, after his 6th consecutive sprint success yesterday. He's getting a little bit fed up, though, isn't he, of the moniker Mr. Saturdays. He wants to be known as Mr. Sundays, Lewis. I mean, if we do get a dry MotoGP race over 27 laps, well, without question, the 93 is the favourite. Yeah,
and he'll have the memories of what happened to him in Jerez, certainly in the forefront of his mind, to try and enjoy. Doesn't make the same mistake. Regained the World Championship lead yesterday with his victory in the sprint. You have to credit Fabio Quartararo for making Marc Marquez work as hard as he did. Certainly pushed hard in the early stages to try and build up an early advantage, and Marc Marquez let the sprint come to him in the end. On a Saturday afternoon, he remains undefeated. On Sunday afternoons, though, he is prone to the odd error. Of course, he is the flag-to-flag master himself, is Marc Marquez. He does seem to have every angle covered. Guess if you're not Marc Marquez, you want as much uncertainty as possible.
Quartararo made him work hard for it in the early part of yesterday's sprint, but once he got to the front and got his head down, Bradley, you kind of felt it was all pretty academic from that point on, was he? It's not easy, but Marc made it look easy yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. He had everything in control pretty much from Friday. You could see that he just had the setup that he wanted, and he's just been making small refinements during the weekend. Fabio, as we know, engine is a bit down on power, so he just has to keep on trying to claw back in the brakes. And the problem is with that, as soon as that rear tyre drops a little bit, surprising to maybe to most people to hear, is actually when the tyre drops, it also means that you have to brake earlier, you know, because it just doesn't have that bite. The engine brake doesn't quite work as much. You can't use the rear brake quite as well, and that's just where Fabio would have been struggling a little bit compared to those guys.
Well, he certainly looks great. He looks cool, doesn't he, in that special home race livery as well that Fabio Quartararo unveiled last night in front of packed grandstands in Le Mans. Always a special atmosphere on Saturday evenings. As we've just told you, of course, we have confirmation about record weekend crowd in MotoGP history. Do you give Fabio much hope of maybe running the Ducati a little bit closer today, Bradley?
It seemed that he was able to stabilise. It seemed that the tyre dropped quite quick yesterday. It was like 3-4 laps, and then it dropped maybe slightly earlier than the Ducatis. But then once it did drop, he was able to kind of maintain the gap a little bit there. So maybe he would have learned something in the sprint race. Maybe someone like Fabio, actually with this being his home race, decided, you know what, I'm going to roll the dice. We need to change the bike a tiny bit to give me a bit more opportunity there. But yeah, it would be amazing for these guys to see a Frenchman on the podium, so fingers crossed.
It would be absolutely awesome. We've not had a French MotoGP winner on home turf in over 70 years, all the way back in 1954. We just saw there how hard Quartararo was having to work for that bronze medal yesterday. He just came out the wrong side of that scrap with Fermin Aldeguer. We said throughout the weekend that the first podium for Aldeguer was coming. Well, he didn't make us wait too long, did he? What a ride and what a battle that was with Fabio Quartararo. His first podium finish of 2025.
Bagnaia coming out to understand the very latest with the weather. We can see some more raincoats going on, some umbrellas going up. Such a tense phase, of course. Rain before the Grand Prix could lead to potentially a quandary on tyre choice. Confirmation from Jack Appleyard in pit lane, where we currently see Jack Miller that the rain is starting to fall once again. Marc Marquez keen to have a look. Of course, when we had rain prior to a MotoGP race a month ago, Marc Marquez triggered all that chaos in the moments before the Grand Prix getting underway.
Jack Miller, a name that really does come to the forefront of your mind if we are to get a wet Grand Prix or potentially a flag-to-flag race here. A former race winner himself in Le Mans. As we mentioned, these are pretty tense and nervy times. They are regardless, but when you've got the weather elements to contend with, well, he swapped the famous El Diablo logo on the back of those leathers for Le Mans 25. And Le Mans 2025 will live long in the memory with our record weekend crowd in attendance. Of course, we are going to get that incredible rendition of Le Marseillaise in, what, about 20 minutes' time. They love their MotoGP, and they would love nothing more than to see Fabio Quartararo deliver a big performance here today. As we continue our build-up, you've not been joining us just for this weekend in the commentary box, Bradley. Of course, you have been busy doing other things, catching up with a lot of people. We should reference it now in the build-up. An exciting new announcement, a big reason why you're here this weekend. A new Harley-Davidson Championship will race at 6 MotoGP wins, 6 races next year. I know you're a part of the bagger scene now over in America, so a rather interesting innovation coming to MotoGP next year. What do you think the fans will make of it over here in Europe?
Judging by most people's comments, it's Marmite. It's you love it or you hate it. I'm certainly a fan of it. It's just great that we've brought another manufacturer to the MotoGP platform. And yeah, it's very exciting. It should be a spec bike, spec series. 12 to 16 riders are going to be on the grid. It'll be very similar to the bagger that's based of what we're racing at the moment over in Moto America. And yeah, it's been fun. Myself and Carl Wyman have been here, showing them around the MotoGP paddock, seeing what I've known for the last 15 years. And we walk in on Friday and the grandstands are packed, and it's just a sight to behold here at Le Mans, and even the atmosphere today. So very much looking forward to it. I don't know exactly what racetracks there will be at, but it will be 6 races starting in Austin next year and then 5 in Europe. So exciting times for everyone involved. Absolutely,
yeah. 6 Grand Prix across Europe and North America, 12 race series, plenty to look forward to in 2026 and beyond. Of course, we've been inundated with special celebrity guests here this weekend. A pleasure having Bradley in the commentary box with us. And of course, we just saw their Tour de France legend, the record-breaking winner of stages in Le Tour, Mark Cavendish, who's been here this weekend, really enjoying the atmosphere of this record crowd.
Spots of rain now hitting our commentary box window. Pecco Bagnaia looking a little bit pensive there inside the Ducati box, but it's rain potentially his best opportunity to fight for victory. Of course, our last wet Grand Prix, he won it back in Buriram last season. He only made it though as far as the second lap in the sprint yesterday before he crashed into the Dunlop chicane, and it does appear, Bradley, as if there's a little bit of a crisis of confidence going on at the moment for Pecco Bagnaia.
Yeah, crisis of confidence or crisis of feeling. That crash, didn't look like he was lacking confidence. Just, that front end is not talking to him. Just at that final end of trail braking there, just as he was about to fully release it and start, going into that neutral phase, just losing the front. So whatever it is, it's just not talking to him and not giving him the warning that he needs. The problem is, if you listen to that and you take a step back, you're 0.3 off the pace and you go backwards. The other thing is, you don't listen to it, you push on and you end up on your backside. And yeah, it's catch-22 and it's a difficult one to juggle.
Yeah, that spill yesterday for Bagnaia in the sprint now leaves just Alex Marquez. Consistency so key and vital when you're building a championship challenge. Only Alex now remains as the only rider to score points in all sprints and Grand Prix so far this season. We welcome back Miguel Oliveira to Pramac Yamaha. I guess if Oliveira was fully dialed in and in tune with that Yamaha, having not missed the last 3 Grand Prix and potential rain falling, well, you'd have to throw Miguel's name into the equation as a possible race winner.
On board that special French-flavoured livery for the Pramac squad as well. Of course, one of their principal sponsors are the French sports car brand Alpine. And of course, very well represented in the Formula 1 paddock at the moment. And that is the bike that Miguel Oliveira will be competing on this afternoon. Of course, Pramac would feel, as you say, in normal circumstances, that they'll have every angle covered in these wet conditions. Miguel Oliveira, so often a front runner in these wet conditions, and I feel the greater the uncertainty, the more that Jack Miller will thrive this afternoon.
So there is Marc Marquez. He has not won a French Grand Prix since 2019. He has won 3 of them in the past. Of course, if we do get a flag-to-flag scenario, the 93 was always an absolute master of judging the perfect time when to pit for the change of tyres. Why do you think Marc has been so good down the years? Bradley, at flag to flags. I mean, he always just seems to have that knack of knowing that they're absolute perfect time to come in and change bikes.
Yeah, he does. And Mark, let's say, is an extremely brave rider. You know, he doesn't lack confidence, he doesn't lack feel, his reaction time, so he's never afraid necessarily to ride in slightly damp conditions with slicks, because his cat-like reflexes always seem to get him out of trouble. He's very dynamic on the bike. He's able to gather up a lot of mistakes, as we've seen over the years. So, yeah, I think part of that is just the no fear, full confidence attitude. And then just a really good communication with his team, knowing that when they say to pit, he pits. You know, or... Yeah, I think that's what seems to always be the thing with his guys back there at Repsol Honda. They just always gave him the right information at the right time. And yeah, this will be interesting to see with Ducati if they've dialed it in as closely as they had at Repsol. Repsol had a lot of years to get it right. But yeah, you can't bet against him in these circumstances.
Yeah, he'll be a tough cookie to beat this afternoon. Will Marc Marquez. We're just looking at the tyre allocation. That is, of course, the slick options, which we hope for a dry Grand Prix. But if it is wet, well, there are two options: the soft front and rear, and the medium front and rear. We just saw as Fabio Quartararo left pit lane, there was a few spots of rain on our camera lens on the outside of the first corner.
Were guys on soft this morning on the rain tyres, or did some guys try a medium or a hard? Did we see anything there? Yeah. Be interesting just not to know what happens, because Le Mans just one of those tracks that has quite high grip most of the time, because it's a new surface, except for the last corner, it seems. And then with these temperatures as well, you know, normally we would expect 12 degrees air temperature, maybe only 12 degrees track, but the track temperature will still be, I think, you know, well above 25 degrees right now. So maybe also playing the long game with a harder rain tyre could also pay out.
Yeah, the majority of riders this morning were on the medium wet weather front tyre, sort of split between the medium and the front, but 2/3 went on the medium and the rest went on the soft, and everyone was on the soft rear rain tyre.
Those campsites have been rather noisy, it's fair to say, over the course of the weekend, as Marc Marquez already having a little bit of a practice, an audition, a dress rehearsal for a potential flag-to-flag bike swap. Going out there on fresh slicks. I don't know if he was maybe just scrubbing off a set of rain tyres there, potentially, Bradley. Well, why do riders sometimes tend to favour doing that?
It takes the shine off the top of the tyre, which in the rain definitely helps a ton. Just because the track's a lot less abrasive in the rain, you take off that shine quicker, and it seems to just have a better grip reaction to the surface. It does feel as shiny and as slippery as it looks, and once you get it off, then it's sort of okay, so that makes sense. And then I imagine Mark's going to scrub the slicks just so psychologically he knows even if there's wet spots that first lap, he can really still crack on with a lightly scrubbed set of slicks then.
Well, I'm sure Jack's getting neck ache down in pit lane, trying to keep an eye on what's happening skywards. Jack, what's the latest in terms of the weather?
Yeah, the rain continuing to fall. It's just picking up ever so slightly now, but the biggest indicator of just how intense the rain is right now, a look across these packed grandstands, not a single umbrella up at the moment, which gives you an idea that it is still pretty light. No chance that anybody will start on wet tyres if the rain continues at this level, but the forecast does say as we get closer to the start time, it should intensify.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack. Yeah, I can just see 100,000 people are getting sore necks at the moment, because they're all looking skywards to see what will happen weather-wise. Most of the weather forecasts when we arrived at the track this morning were suggesting strong rain at around 2 p.m. Local time. Well, safe to say we have plenty of home crowd heroes this weekend, one of them being Johann Zarco. The French fan would love it, wouldn't they, if Zarco was in the mix at the front of this Grand Prix. Let's get the thoughts of Johann, who is with Jack.
Johann, over 300,000 people here over the course of the weekend, all cheering you on as you just do some final talks with helmet technicians to get sorted. This weather not ideal at the moment. Looks as though the rain will get heavier as we get closer to 2 o'clock. Right now, what are you thinking?
I'm waiting. We are on the grid, but there are still 20 minutes to go. And it seems it's gonna rain. Big clouds are coming, so we are just waiting. And right now we could go with slick, but already having the drops on the screen and on the helmet doesn't give a big confidence. But I think it's gonna rain. So if we can put the rain tires straight away, it will be less stressful, and then we will have to keep the focus to the end.
Good luck.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks very much to LCR Honda rider Johan Zarco. Well, you could just sort of sense the sort of tension in his voice there, couldn't you, as everybody just kind of waiting to see what happens with the weather.
Yeah, here's the grid lineup, and everybody on our starting grid currently indicated to be starting on soft front and rear Michelin dry tyres. I guess the weather forecast playing pretty heavily into that, because you might not need those dry tyres for very long once the race gets underway. The majority of the riders who spoke yesterday after the sprint said that they have no concerns of that soft rear tyre going full race distance if it were to be taken in dry conditions.
A pretty spectacular air show going overhead for the Le Mans fans here. I'm not sure I've really got the head or the stomach for something like that, to be perfectly honest. I'm much more happier and content when I've got both feet planted firmly on terra firma. Giving us a great view, though, of this Bugatti circuit as the drone camera then peels towards the grid. We're about, what, 10 minutes away from the spectacular, rousing rendition of the Marseillaise, which will have extra significance and meaning, with Fabio Quartararo starting from pole position. And perfect timing, let's see from Fabio down on pole with Jack.
Fabio, a record crowd, all wanting to celebrate later on, but these conditions less than ideal. Right now, how are you feeling ahead of the race?
Yeah, you know, it's Le Mans, it's always tricky condition, and you know, having the rain just before the start is always a mess. You never know if it's dry or wet, but we will have to give our maximum and try to see if we can make a great race today.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fabio Quartararo, for talking to us. Thanks very much to Jack. He's not going to run off the grid again, is he?
No, well, at least he knows the penalty now if he does that. That has been confirmed during the week. If anybody does leave the grid and has to leave the warm-up lap from the pit lane, we do now know with great clarity the sanction. You'll take your grid position and serve a double long lap penalty in the race. So if Marc Marquez is plotting another runner from the grid, he knows what awaits him.
What did you make of that? I'm sure you're watching, Austin. I mean, what did you think of when Mark went full Usain Bolt off the grid?
Well, I thought it was an absolute touch of brilliance until afterwards everyone explained what penalty he should have got. But yeah, he also turned around and did say that he did expect other people to follow, and once it's above 10 riders, then, you know, that's a red flag. But yeah, wily old Mark, and that's what I mean by he's just always got something up his sleeve. There's always something there that he's just thinking about how he can get an edge, which is, you know, why he's one of the best in the world.
Yeah, well, he's had the edge so far this weekend, hasn't he? Certainly when it looks at the race pace. That was in the dry, though, of course, on the Michelin slick rubber. As you can see, Pecco Bagnaia, he's looking up towards the threatening grey clouds. You can see his crew chief there, Christian Gavarini. I mean, I guess in this scenario, Bradley, ultimately the decision on what to do tyre-wise, strategy-wise, is down to rider. You listen to the feedback and the thoughts of team management and your crew chief, but I guess it's ultimately down to what the rider decides he wants to do. Yeah,
it's fully down to the rider, because also what rain we can get here on the pit lane is not necessarily what rain we have on the back straight. This track is just over the 4 kilometre mark. It's probably best part of 1.5 kilometres between here and the furthest point away, and that's just one of those ones where it can just be raining a little bit more or a little bit less. Also depends track by track. Sometimes the rain affects it straight away and it becomes like a sheet of ice, and other times you can actually get away with quite a lot of drops and still feeling grippy. So yeah, ultimately it's down to the rider, which all the pressure's on your shoulders, and also you have a look at what the other riders are doing. You go with the majority, and you know, that's normally a safe bet.
There's some rather frantic radio calls going on right now, isn't there? Certainly on Bagnaia's side of the factory, Ducati guys. We just saw there, didn't we, Marc Marquez having a chat with Ducati boss Davide Tardozzi.
Pretty heavy to me.
On the distance there, yeah, off in the distance, you can see that rain is starting to...
Change of front tyre, I'm sure that is. That's Gavarini for Pecco. Pecco's decided to change that front tyre there, I think. Or they've just been keeping it warm until the very last minute.
Yeah, good spot, Bradley. Well, we saw off in the distance there, that looked like it was a sort of a round Shimano berth, then it turns 9 and 10 where the umbrellas were up, that the raincoats were on. Now then, one rider who normally revels in these kind of scenarios, and if it does rain and we get a flag to flag, well, you'd expect him, you'd back him to be right at the sharp. And let's get the thoughts of Pramac Yamaha rider Jack Miller, who's with Jack.
Yes, the rain just starts to thicken down here on the grid. Jack, it looks as though this could be a flag to flag. What's going to be key to getting that decision right?
Yeah, we're waiting at the moment, see what they say, if they do rain on grid or not. Apart from that, I mean, it's a lottery, it's anyone's guess. It's kind of not enough water at the minute to go to the wets. Well, definitely not enough water at the minute, but it's also pretty dodgy on the slicks, so good luck. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks very much to both Jack and Jack. We're sitting next to an ex-MotoGP rider who's been in this situation before, but I'd imagine right now he's quite happy to be sat in our nice, comfy, cosy, warm commentary box when you hear the thoughts of some of these guys, Bradley.
Yeah, you could hear it in Jack's voice there and then, and Jack's not someone to actually show any emotion whatsoever, but even him is saying it's dodgy, so you know it's a risky situation out there. Yeah, it's so difficult one to call. And it's still what we got. We've still got 14 minutes, you know, so the mechanics will just be trying to do the best at what they can. You know, we can just see on the mud guard there, even from KTM, how much it is still raining. So yeah, tough call for everybody. It's not fun. I think everyone forgets these riders are out there with probably about 4 millimeters of leathers between them and the tarmac, and it's not fun to be sliding along it. So there's a little bit of scaredness sometimes.
Let's go and hear from a current four-wheeled superstar. Isaac Hadjar, Formula 1 driver, is down on the grid with Jack.
Yeah, he is indeed. A man that knows perfectly well what kind of challenge these conditions can provide. Isaac, is in your shoes right now, this is a nightmare for these guys. I'm sure you can understand how they're feeling.
Yeah, especially on the motorbike, you know, like in cars it's a bit different, you know, you have 4 tires, more stability. Here you can't make any mistakes, so yeah, it's a tough one to make, so whatever Mac does, you just do the same, I think.
Not a bad idea for Fabio and Johan. There's 120,000 here today, all roaring them on. Yeah. What is that like? The emotion they must be feeling right now is probably quite special.
Well, I can't relate because I don't have a home Grand Prix, but yeah, it must feel unbelievable, and I'm cheering for them.
Great to see you here. Have fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful to hear the thoughts of Isaac Hadjar then, the Racing Bulls F1 driver. Yeah, as we see the tension just being ramped up here. There's that's a new rear tyre, isn't it, being brought to one of the Red Bull KTM Tech 3 bikes. Some last-minute instructions and discussions going on here with Johan Zarco, who looks every day 34 years old right now, doesn't he? Just looks sort of, he's aging by the second, old Zarco, at the moment.
I cannot say anything about that.
When you get to my age, you certainly can't talk about that. You know, well, as you mentioned, if Jack Miller says it's dodgy, well, then you know it's dodgy. Anyone's guess about what the weather's going to throw at us, and anyone's guess about who's going to be fighting at the front of this MotoGP battle, just trying to keep himself focused, keep himself in that zone, is Marc Marquez. Yeah, tough times.
I think this is Marc Marquez now returning to the grid. Of course, not leaving the grid in the same circumstances as he did in Austin, but that could well happen once again here. Of course, as mentioned, double long lap penalty will come the way of a rider if they on their motorcycle leave the grid for any reason. They would start a long lap from pit lane, take their original grid position and survey. Double long lap penalty. That regulation regarding 10 or more riders leaving the grid does remain in place. So if we see that scenario in the minutes before the race gets underway, the start will be aborted.
When you sort of think about the likes of Fermin Aldeguer that we just saw there on screen, Dan Iagura, another of his fellow rookies, they have very limited wet experience in MotoGP. Certainly potentially preparing for their first experience of a flag-to-flag situation here in the Premier class. There is Jack Miller. Jack just having another chat there with his crew chief, Giacomo Guidotti. Huge experience, of course, Giacomo Guidotti. Yesterday it certainly wasn't beanie hat weather, was it? But today the temperatures have certainly dropped, and Jack just trying to work out what will be his plan and strategy for this 27-lap Grand Prix of France.
Jack just there, already discussing with his team which way the wind's coming from. So he already knows where to look for the rain. So it looks like it's a tailwind down the main straight today. So he'll be looking towards sector 4 where the rain will strike first.
Well, we are approaching one of the most jaw-dropping and goosebump moments of the MotoGP World Championship season as Fabio Quartararo comes back to the grid, comes back to the head of the grid for the 3rd time here in Le Mans. Pole in 2020, pole in 2021, and pole once again in brilliant fashion yesterday. We're going to hear over 100,000 fans belt out a stunning rendition of the Marseillaise. In the build-up to this French Grand Prix, Fabio Quartararo said it gives him goosebumps. The local crowd announcer whipping the crowd up into a frenzy as we're just seconds away from a moment that really does take your breath away in MotoGP.
Must that feel if you are Fabio Quartararo? Understandably looking a little bit tense, a little bit emotional, and a little bit nervous. We're less than 10 minutes away from the start of this French Grand Prix, and still we ask the question what the weather will throw for us. Jack, what's the latest?
The rain now at its heaviest that it's been all day. I'm stood right at the rear of Marc Marquez's bike, who is in constant communication with Marco Rigamonti. This is a scene that we've all seen before just a few weeks ago in Austin. Marc pointing over to the right-hand side and pit lane. I'm sure checking with Marco Rigamonti, who's now on the radio, to make sure that that wet bike is ready. And if he has to, with a couple of minutes remaining, like we saw just a few weeks ago, he will make that sprint again.
Yeah, all eyes, I guess, on the 93 who starts from second on the grid. And how much of this is your own decision, Bradley, or do you look at everybody else? Do you look at someone like Marc Marquez, who generally does lead the way in these sort of situations?
It's very different rider to rider, and mainly because it depends where you are in the championship. If you've got something to lose, you're probably going for the smart decision. If you've got nothing to lose, you're probably going for the gamble. Just asking, if they were to pull off right now, off the grid, what is the penalty?
Double long lap penalty. If you start the warm-up lap from the pit lane and then join the grid, you serve a double long lap penalty. The pit lane exit is now closed, so anyone who is in the pit lane now is not allowed to leave pit lane until the warm-up lap begins. If you do that, you will serve a double long lap penalty.
So the option is still on the table for guys to do the sighting lap now, come back through the pits and pick it up, and there's no penalty for that. Okay, great.
Unless more than 10 riders are in pit lane set to start from there, and then we could see an aborted start.
Well, he just jumped off that factory Ducati, didn't he, and walked, what, 10 metres in front of the front row, just to try and calculate just how heavy the rain is falling. I just stepped out the commentary box myself, just to listen to that La Marseillaise rendition, and the rain spots are starting to fall that little bit heavier. 2 p.m. local time, which we're very close to right now here in Le Mans, was when we were expecting the arrival of some pretty heavy downpours. As you can see there in the main grandstands, part of it uncovered. A lot of fans aren't bothering with the umbrellas or the rain jackets just at the moment, despite the fact that the rain is falling. Just over 5 minutes away then from lights out here in Le Mans. Frankie Morbidelli yesterday didn't get the whole shot device engaged in time and had a real poor start from, well, dropped him all the way back down to 19th spot at one point. He did recover on that Ducati GP24 to finish in 15th place. spare bike, second bike's already prepped and ready. Does have a feeling of flag to flag about it, doesn't it, here right now at the Bugatti circuit. Alex Marquez, 6 sprints, 6 second places, victorious last time out in front of his home crowd in Jerez. 5 years and 94 starts in the Premier class before he was able to taste victory. Will that be the catalyst for Alex to really start winning more and more in MotoGP? There's Marco Rigamonti to Marc Marquez's left, on your right as you look at it.
Still sitting on his bike, not standing by it.
Everybody's going to be looking at Marc, aren't they? Everybody will be looking at what Marc's doing.
What's the last time that they can move before to go off of the grid? Is it 3 minutes to go?
Well, the time has already passed in terms of being
so
able to leave the grid
start
and rejoin the grid.
Okay.
If you leave the grid now, you will be able to take your place on the grid, but you have to start the warm-up lap from the pit lane, which leads to an automatic double long lap.
Fabio Quartararo then, starting from pole position. What lies in store over the next 27 laps for the Frenchman? As we mentioned, Pierre Monneray, all the way back in 1954, was the last French rider to win in the Premier class on home soil. So it's going to be a very nervy, intense pit lane as well, because at some point maybe in the next 27 laps or so they'll be expecting, or possibly expecting, their riders to peel in. Brad Binder, well, he's won pretty dramatic flag-to-flag race in the past. Cast your minds back to that unforgettable Red Bull Ring Austrian Grand Prix back in 2021, where he was in that lead group with Quartararo at the time, Marc Marquez, I think Joan Mir was there as well, and he just went, you guys can go in and switch to the rain tyres, I'm staying out on slicks. Still not sure how on earth he won that Grand Prix and kept himself upright.
He is the sole rider, by the way, on the grid as the 3-minute board goes up, so the time to be able to change tyres on the grid has now passed. But Brad Binder is on the medium Michelin slick front tyre. Everybody else is on the soft front and rear.
That is so much rain out there at the moment. It's just seeing the BMW safety car there, that is horrible amount of rain. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people come back through the pit lane at this point. So
here is your front row of the grid. Alex Marquez, second in the World Championship, second once again in the sprint here yesterday. Can he make it back-to-back wins in the Premier class for the very first time? Alongside him is his brother Marc, back at the top of the MotoGP World Championship, 2 points clear after his 6th successive sprint victory yesterday. But the home crowd hero fires away from pole. A nation expects, France expects, Quartararo and pole in Le Mans.